Hey team, this is a video on the first 5 things I would be doing if I wanted to peak at my next competition. All too often we get to competitions and we feel unprepared, and then maybe things don't quite go the way that we wanted and we look back and wish we'd done things differently. So if I had a big competition coming up or an event or a time that I wanted to be in peak performance for, these are the 5 things that I would be doing to enable that to happen. And incidentally, these are the things I do with all of my athletes on a daily basis, so they definitely are all valid and all work. The most important start point is going to be your training audit. For you to be able to peak for an event or a competition coming up, and by the way, at the time of filming, the Open is 5 months away, so that could very well be your next event, you need to have a proper plan. And for you to have a proper plan, you need to first know what you're doing and why you're addressing the things. So your training audit is really to evaluate where you're currently are, pinpoint exactly where your weaknesses are across the board, and then identify which are the biggest priority things to fix. And often that is going to be what we call the lowest hanging fruit. So of all of the things that you believe you're weak at, people are often very good at identifying their weaknesses, not so good at identifying their strengths. But say you've got 10 things that you believe that you're weak at, and you only have time to work on 3 of them, which 3 things are going to move the biggest margin in your performance? So if you're missing base skills or you can't do a certain lift, that's probably going to be where the biggest margin is for you. If you can do everything fairly well, then it's probably pushing up the capacity of the skills that are more common or skills that you definitely know are going to come up in your competition. Now, looking at this first from a strength perspective, if you're not sure where your current strengths and weaknesses lie within movements, because you go, well, like, I can snatch, I can clean, I can deadlift, I can bend, like I can do all of the movements. So how do I know which are my weak ones? I know which ones my favorites are, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your least favorites are your weakest. You can use something like this framework that I'm about to show you now. This is from a programming company called OPEX. It's actually a company or a training organization that I've used to coach me in the past. This is what their framework suggests. And this uses your back squat as your base lift. So if your back squat was 100 kilos, just because it's easy maths to work from, that means for you to be balanced as an athlete, your front squat would be 85 kilos, your deadlift would be 125 kilos, your power clean would be 65 kilos, and so on. So if one of those numbers is massively low or really high, then you can ignore that one and focus on the areas that are out of whack. So this is one way you can do it. This is pretty in-depth. If you are coming at this as more of a beginner level athlete, then this is probably not going to be something you need. But if you're at that higher level or intermediate stepping into RX, this would be something that is very useful to take note of. From a gymnastics perspective, what I get to do, what I choose to do with my athletes is find out exactly where they are in every single skill. And my first question is, can you do the 3 basic skills, which is your toaster bar, your kipping pull-up, and your handstand push-up? They're the 3 more basic gymnastic skills that are going to come up. Well, before your handstand push-up, it's actually your wall walk, but that's kind of in the progressions there. If any of those skills are missing, then that would be my first priority. So if, for example, you already have a good kipping pull-up and you're thinking, oh, but I can't butterfly pull-up, but you can't yet handstand push-up, to me, that's a bigger priority than learning to butterfly pull-up. Because if you can do a pull-up, you can do a pull-up so you can get through a workout. But if you can't yet do a handstand push-up, then that's a problem. So thinking strategically about which margins are going to have the bigger input is important. And that's what I was talking about at the start. So if you've got your 3 baseline movements, then next it'd be looking to gain your muscle up, your handstand walk, your chest bar. And if you've got everything, then it's pushing the capacity up of all of those movements. Now, what's going to be a huge determinant of what you work on will be how much time you have in each training week. And for those that have less time, you can focus well on a small number of goals, and that's still going to be a huge margin for you. If you've got more time, then you can do a good amount of work on more goals, which makes logical sense, right? And when I'm looking at this, I think you need between 30 and 60 minutes to work on one goal well in your training week. So let's take a toaster bar. If someone wanted to work on learning a toaster bar or improving their toaster bar, I'll be spending at least 30 minutes on strength, pull related strength to your toaster bar, and 30 minutes on the skill. So that would be a 60-minute session, or maybe that's split into 2 sessions. So say someone also wanted to work on a kipping pull-up. Now, their kipping pull-up strength component would be the same as the toaster bar. So they overlap, and that would be a good use of time if you're short on time. And then you'd add in your 30 minutes of skill work for your kipping pull-up. So now you're on 90 minutes to do those two skills. If your second skill was unrelated, so say you wanted to do your toaster bar and you wanted to do a snatch, that's kind of like a completely different set of strength and skill work. So that would take an hour in itself. So that's looking at 2 hours. So if in your training week, you've got 2 spare hours, you can probably work on 2 things really well, or maybe 3 things if a couple of them overlap in the strength portions. So knowing that and knowing how much time you have each week will then allow you to decide how many things am I going to focus on the lead up to the competition, and which things are of the most priority and will move the needle the most for my performance. And that is where your plan needs to be centered around. Moving on, this is similar, but getting a bit more in depth. You want to make sure that your strength-based training in your week is targeted to your weak points. So I've kind of just outlined that with an example of a toaster bar and a kipping pull-up, but to look a little bit more broadly, when you identify your strengths and weaknesses in your training audit, if you are generally okay at lifting, but you suck at gymnastics, then your strength work should really all be targeted around gymnastics. So focus your efforts on strict pulling strength, strict pushing strength, and core work. If you're the flip, your gymnastics is good and you've got a good base there, but you struggle to lift heavy lifts, you struggle with your snatches and your clean and jerks, then you need to be focusing your strength work on squats, deadlifts, overhead squats, like push press, push jerk, strict press. So it's really being clever with where do your weaknesses lie, and then build your strength around that. Because every time you get stronger, you will get more skilled in the process as well. Next, now looking a bit more in the gymnastics realm, you need to be clever with the way that you structure your skill-based training. If you can't do a movement yet, stop putting it in WODs and expecting to make any progress. If you've identified that you can't yet do those 3 basic movements, or maybe you can do those, but you can't yet do the next set of movements, you need time in your training week to actually work on this skill and make that skill training a priority. Don't just think, oh, I'll just do like 5 minutes of drills at the end of my class, because that's not priority training and it's not going to get you the results that you want. If you've identified that learning a particular movement or improving a movement is going to move the needle for you, then that skill-based training needs to be dedicated, thoughtful time within your training week. And often with my athletes, I get them to do this at the start of the session where they're most fresh, they're most attentive, and they've got the most cognitive and physical load to give that movement, because skill learning is really difficult, especially with gymnastic skills, especially as adults when we're maybe not as coordinated as we used to be when we were kids. So it's important that you actually have proper time in your training week to dedicate to this. This one's very important. When we're wanting to peak for an event or a competition, it's very easy to fall into the trap that you need to suddenly ramp up your training volume and suddenly attack things a lot harder, and that is going to help. And I guess to an extent it could help, but really that's not the angle that I would be looking at things. If I really wanted to peak in my performance for a certain event, I need to make sure I'm spending enough time in the week at the targeted intensity to make that piece matter. So if this is a strength piece, I need to make sure that I'm lifting with good form to the top end of my current ability, so close to failure. If this is a skill, like learning a skill, then the targeted intensity would be well thought out, cognitive, focused, clever movements with intent and thought. If this is an aerobic thing, the correct intensity would be the correct duration of a slow enough speed to get the aerobic gains. If this is a WOD, it's going to be hard enough, fast enough, and with enough attack to gain the metabolic gains that you're after. So it's not just doing more volume and doing more. It's making sure that you've got clear guidelines in your head of, okay, I'm in a strength piece now. What is the goal of this strength piece? What intensity should I be working at? And making sure that you hit that. It is far better to do less things in the week, train for less days, do less sets, do less sections, but do them at the correct intensity and do them really well to a high quality. You will get much further in your journey than just ramping up volume. And that is why very, very often when I'm coaching athletes, we reduce their training volume down from what they think they need. We do less sessions. we do them really well and they go so much further. They get much stronger and much more skilled and enjoy it a lot more. And the other reason why we sometimes reducing is the answer is because it actually gives the body time in between the sessions or the sets to adapt and recover. People often forget that, or they just don't know, the gains that you make from your session are not made in the session. That's where the body is primed and given the capacity to make gains, but the actual adaptations that happen in your body happen when you rest. And if you don't rest, they don't happen to the same extent that they could. So it's important to hit the intensity that is required to maximally prime your body to make adaptations, and then to rest so that your body can make the adaptations. Because the people who just do more volume, they then don't have enough recovery to benefit from the volume they were doing. So in a lot of cases, it's in vain. So train hard, rest hard. It's also good for your psyche. Balance your lifestyle. Last one then. When we are practicing WODs, because this will be an important part of your comp prep or event prep, you need to practice them with purpose, because guaranteed when you get to the event day, suddenly you're going to be thinking about, how do I get the most out of this workout? What strategically do I need to do to finish in the fastest time or to lift the heaviest weight? And trying to do that for the first time at a competition means inevitably you're not going to get the best result. So when you do have WODs in your lead up, it's going into each one like it's a mini competition and thinking, okay, what pacing should I try? What do I think is going to get me the quickest time? What strategy do I think I need to employ in order to achieve the heaviest lift? And practice these in your sessions so that when you get to competitions and you're faced with a workout, you can go, oh, I remember I've practiced this, something similar, and I know that that's the strategy I need to then employ. And in a lot of cases, it's doing smaller sets or smaller reps than you think you need to, having a short rest and then going again. So practice it, because it makes a big difference. And then if you are prepping for a competition and you're feeling like you maybe not where you want to be, I always like to finish these presentations with a little bit of motivation. So here are 4 athletes on my screen who pretty much started all their training from scratch with me and have had huge wins in competitions, whether that be lifts or new skills that they've managed to perform. And all of them have used the framework in this video in order to do that. So put a bit of thought into the next few months of your training leading into whatever event that you are prepping for. Think about everything that I've said, and I guarantee you will have a really good time, and good luck.